Hello everyone, welcome to WORDCORE. Are you ready to talk all things words? My name is Carolina and today we'll explore the word solitude. We'll look at it from the perspective of art, history, life, and more. Stay tuned and let's learn some new things together. Right, this is the second episode of WORDCORE I have ever recorded. I have just recorded the intro, but it does feel a little bit easier, so let's hope it's going to be easier with each episode. I'm definitely not as stressed as the first time, so let's see how this goes. Today we're going to talk about some really cool things. We're going to talk about my favorite movie director, Pedro Almodóvar. We're going to talk about my favorite painter, Edward Hopper, and we're going to talk about some interesting dining solutions from early 20th century in New York. So yeah, let's get to it. I could not go forward with the episode without reading the Oxford Dictionary definition of the word solitude, so let me read it out for you. According to the Oxford Dictionary, solitude is the state of being alone, especially when you find it pleasant, which threw me off a little bit because I always associated the word solitude with being alone, but in a negative way. So the word comes from Latin, solitudo, from solus, alone, which makes me think if the word solo comes from solitude. So let me just check that right now live. Let's find out if the word solo comes from solitude. Okay, so the word solo has its origin from the same word solitude does, from the Latin solus, which means alone. So now it makes sense. So solo and solitude origin from the same word, but solo doesn't origin from solitude. I have to admit that one of the reasons I chose the word solitude for this episode is because I love the Spanish version of the word soledad. And now that I said the word, I can't not talk about Soledad from Pedro Almodóvar's movie Volver, which is amazing. Soledad in the movie is a hairdresser working from home. She's this shy character whose facial expressions are quite funny to me. She's playing Raimunda's sister, and she's totally different from her sister in a movie. But if you haven't seen a movie, or if you haven't seen any movies from Pedro Almodóvar, you absolutely should. If you've never seen any of his movies, let me describe his cinematography in a few words. His movies often are heavy. They are red in every sense of the word. They are hot and dry like Spanish summers. They are mysterious and confusing at times. Many of his movies, I find the concepts of them just being not absurd, but very rare and interesting. He has a very specific way of, coming up with the storyline. I once read or listened to an interview with Pedro, and he said that he gets inspired by random things. Like he might hear something on the news, like an absurd story he would hear or read in the news, and then he would transform it into a storyline or a plot in his movies. So that's why the topics of his movies and the little scenes in there can sometimes be so outrageous, but at the same time he is inspired by real life, maybe not necessarily always his life, but things he hears or reads about that have actually happened in real life. So that's actually a bit crazy to think about, but yeah, he's an incredible storyteller, and I love the aesthetics in his movie. It's one of a kind. His movies are women, strong, independent women. He often portrays sisterhood, these communities that are basically run by women, strong and fierceful, unbreakable. That's what a woman, according to Pedro Almodóvar, is, and that's a great picture of a woman to portray, I think. Yeah, in his movies, women take control of their fate. It's not always the right choice what they're doing. If you've seen, for example, Volver or Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, you know what I'm talking about. But, you know, he shows that they take control. In his movies, women take control of their fate and fight for their freedom. Another motive often shown in his movies is guilt that eats you from within. For example, in Julieta, he also shows a lot of warmth, of love and care. There's a lot of women especially taking care of others or other women, which is just beautiful to see. In his movies, kitchens are these polarizing locations where contrasting events take place from, you know, cooking, which is a extension of love, to murders of passion in many of his movies that also take place in the kitchen. In many of his movies like Volver, Pair or Mothers, Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, important key events take place in the kitchens. And while we're on the topic of Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, I recently was rewatching Sex and the City, as one does, and there was a moment in one of the episodes where Charlotte was really upset by not being able to get a date. And, you know, there's this very dramatic music playing in the background. She's sitting in a park, I think eating something, and she's wearing this vibrant red top. And then Carrie says, well, Charlotte was a woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And I was shocked. I mean, I've seen this episode a million times, and this was the first time I realized they are referencing Pedro Almodóvar, which was just, I don't know. I mean, it was great to notice that since I love him. So yeah, go find the episode because I don't even remember which season it was, but it was really fun to notice the reference to Pedro Almodóvar. To summarize, Almodóvar's movies are very vibrant. I think they really embody the Spanish culture in many ways. They are real, they are sometimes painful, and they sometimes are absurd, but that's what just makes him a great director. And his movies are always a pleasure to watch for me. So if you haven't seen any of his works, go check it out. I'd recommend starting with The Skin I Live In. It's my favorite movie of his. It's actually based off a book, but I just love that movie. So yeah, go and watch some Almodóvar. It's now 2 days after I recorded the episode, but I just saw a movie about Edgar Degas, and it was opened with a quote I absolutely must share for this episode. It goes, "It seems to me that today, if the artist wishes to be serious, he must once more sink himself in solitude." And that was Edgar Degas. And now we can continue with the episode. I think in an episode about solitude, it would be absolutely irresponsible for me not to talk about the master of solitude, the American painter Edward Hopper, who is at the time my favorite painter as well. One of his most recognized paintings is The Nighthawks, and I don't want to talk about it because, although it is my favorite painting of his, I don't want to talk about it because there's so many videos and articles about this painting that go in depth about, you know, everything there is to know about this painting. I don't feel like I could really add much to the conversation. So instead of talking about The Nighthawks, which you absolutely should go and check out, I'm also going to post it on my Instagram, I'm going to talk about some other paintings of his. Like I said, he is considered to be the master of solitude. His paintings emanate this very silent and lonely space. Most of his paintings depict lonely people. They're usually on their own, very often at nighttime, and his images are just very still, you know, they are not dynamic at all, which is not a bad thing. But this is very contrasting to the Baroque era, which we talked about in the first episode, where the art was very dynamic, whereas Hopper's work is still. the silhouettes he's painting are very still. They look like they were not moving before the painting, and it doesn't look like they're about to move, anytime soon. The people in his paintings are usually alone, like I said. Their faces are muffled. They look very lost in thought, like as if they were contemplating, looking into space, looking into nothing. You could assume the people in his paintings are sad or, overwhelmed with something. Obviously, you can interpret it in many ways, but when I look at his paintings, they seem very sad to me and maybe even depressing and lonely. One of my favorite paintings by Hopper is titled Automat, and it's from 1927, and it depicts a woman sitting in an automat restaurant at nighttime. She's obviously alone. She's beautifully dressed, according to the 20s fashion. To me, she looks sad. She's holding this cup of coffee, I would assume, in this little cup, which looks very similar to the one I have. But that's not why this is my favorite painting. I just really love the, dimmed lights, the stillness of this image, and just how quiet it seems. I see this reappearing theme in a lot of his paintings where the characters are sitting, well, they're not always sitting, but they're often holding an object. In this case, it's a cup, and they're looking down at the object, but it's not like, to me, this doesn't look like she's about to drink. It's like she's looking at this object, but really she's only looking down at it because she's lost in thought. And we're going to see this in another painting of his I'm going to talk about later today. But it's interesting how he always places an object in the character's hands, but I feel like the object really doesn't have the function it normally does. I mean, in this case, it doesn't look to me as if she's about to drink whatever is in the cup. To me, this looks like it's just there, and she's, contemplating something, and she's just looking at it, but it's like she's not even there, It looks like in her head, she's somewhere completely else, not even in the restaurant. The woman looks very alienated and silent. It might be that she's waiting for someone. To me, it looks like she's just there alone. You can see the painting on my Instagram. I'm going to post it there, and let me know what you think. If you think she's waiting for someone or she just came there alone after a breakup. I don't know. What do you guys think? You can obviously interpret the painting in so many ways, and interpret the situation in so many ways. But to me, it looks like she's just there alone. She came alone and she's going to leave alone. Like I would. Yesterday, when I was preparing for this episode, what spiked my interest was the title of this painting. It's called Automat, and when I first saw it, I was like, why is it called this? And then I looked into it, and it's because the woman is sitting in an automat restaurant, which doesn't exist anymore, but in the early 20th century, it was a big hit. One of the articles I read about the automat restaurants said they were the golden age of fast food dining, and I think that's so interesting. So let me tell you about the concept a little bit more. Basically, they were these vending machine style restaurants with a whole wall of little glass doors with brass framing, and in each little door there was a warm meal or a dessert or beverage, and you would have to, put a coin, twist the porcelain knob, and you could open the glass door and take your meal, which is an incredible concept, and I so wish they still existed today, but sadly they don't. The first automat appeared in Berlin in 1895, but it quickly migrated to the US, and in 1902 the first automat restaurant was opened in Philadelphia, and it was called Horn and Hardart, and it was an instant hit. They later opened many branches in New York and I think across the US, and it was a place where, they offered affordable meals at very low prices. And so the crowd there was very, mixed. You would see wealthy businessmen, but you would also see construction workers. You would see secretaries, but you would also see celebrities. Even Audrey Hepburn is known to have eaten at the Automat restaurants, which is, imagine going there in the 20s and all the people, well, not all the people, but the 20s fashion to me is incredible. So, this mixed crowd of people from different backgrounds just dining in the same hall, taking out food from the glamorous little cubicles, and that must have been an incredible place to be. I really wish it was still around. But again, even if it was still around, it would be modernized, with probably iPads where you could order the meal and it just would not be the same. But to go back in time and eat at one of these restaurants would be an incredible experience. I would love that. So the food they served at these restaurants were homemade meals, like things you would eat at home. Well, yeah, that's what homemade meals are. From mac and cheese, pot pies, mashed potatoes, vegetable sides like peas and carrots, also desserts, lemon meringue pie, beverages, really anything, Jell-O, I think that was popular at the time. Very homemade style food. They were also famous for their nickel a cup coffee that was freshly brewed at the spot, and also it was cheap because there were no waiters, so they didn't have to pay them. But not apparently, there was obviously staff behind the glass doors, placing food there and keeping up with the demand, which apparently it was very busy up there. I read that they were serving 800,000 meals a day, I would assume across all their branches, but I'm not sure, which is an insane amount of meals to serve during one day. And also the crazy part about it for me is that you would insert a coin in the cubicle, twist the knob and get the meal. And imagine getting a meal with one single coin. I know the value of money was completely different back then, but just imagine getting a meal with a single coin these days. That's a crazy concept to me. Since we all like words on this podcast, here's a brief history of the word automat. It originates from the Greek word automatos, which translates to self-acting. So unfortunately, the automat restaurants declined when customers started to prefer grabbing the food and leaving and not wanting to, sit down and have it at the spot. So unfortunately, they were replaced by restaurants like McDonald's and Burger King, which to me is just so sad. I would love the opportunity to have a meal at one of the automat restaurants, especially back in the 20s. Today, I don't think it would be this special, but you absolutely must see the images from the automat restaurants. I'm going to post some incredible ones on my Instagram, so go check it out. And also, I found these really cool videos from automat restaurants on YouTube. You can type in at the automat and there's a few episodes. I recommend episode 3. It's very funny and I think it's a snippet from an old series that, was airing during that time. So go check it out. It's really funny and you can see the automats sort of in real life, not just in pictures. So go have a look and let me know if you would like to have a meal in one of these restaurants, because I absolutely would. Another painting of Hopper's I'd like to reference today is titled Hotel Room from 1931. And again, it depicts a woman in an empty hotel room. She's sitting down on a bed holding a book and she's looking down at the book. But again, to me, this doesn't look like she's really reading it. To me, this looks like she's lost in her thoughts and just looking down and the book just happens to be in her hands. And this is the motive I talked about before, where a lot of the characters in his paintings are just holding an object, looking down at it, but it doesn't look like they're looking down at it because they're using it. It just looks like they're holding it, they're looking down at it, but they are just completely somewhere else, with their thoughts. And typically for Hopper's paintings, it's very silent. I mean, she's in a room alone, or at least it looks like she is. And I don't know if it's because he painted a lot of people, contemplating, but to me it kind of looks like they don't have the will to live, like they are just very overwhelmed with something very, very heavy. And it's a very sad thing for me to think that his whole life he was really painting sad people, or at least this is how I see it. I mean, I don't know what was happening in his head, but this doesn't look very uplifting. Also, a fun fact, a lot of the women in his paintings look similar because throughout the years, his wife was his only model because she didn't allow him to have other models. So you can really see that the women in his paintings look a lot like Josephine Helper because she was his only model and she was also a painter. So go check her paintings out as well. You can learn so much about Hopper and his art in a movie I saw recently. It's called Edward Hopper, An American Love Story. It's very interesting. They're talking about a lot of his works and, his life. So if you're interested in learning more about this painter, go check out this movie. The hotel room painting really brings me to reflect on my own experience with solitude. I've been living on my own for the past 3 years and I had a very rocky relationship with solitude. In the beginning, I liked it because it was something new, something I've never really experienced before. And then with time, I started hating it. I really was so over, being on my own. Which then turned into me absolutely loving being on my own and living on my own. And now I'm at the stage where I really love my solitude, which, according to its original definition, should be pleasant. There are times when I still feel like the character in the hotel room painting where I'm just, sitting alone and looking into the space, looking into nothing, and just not even thinking sometimes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sad. Yeah, because I rarely am sad in these moments. I'm not sad that I'm alone. I'm not really sad about anything. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this. Just, sitting in silence, staring into the room, and really, I rarely am thinking in these moments. I'm just embracing the silence. Yeah, maybe I do look sad, just like the characters in his paintings. So maybe they are not sad. Maybe they're just like me, embracing the silence, embracing the emptiness, not the emptiness, embracing the solitude. Could be. But yeah, with years, I really just started enjoying being alone and being able to come back to an empty, silent home after socializing during the day or the night. It's just amazing to come back to an empty, silent place and be on your own. I love it. And I know my friends love it too. Although, we obviously would love to have someone there, but it's really comforting to just come back to this silent space and be on your own. And if you are at a point where you're struggling with that and it's, not something you enjoy and you feel like you need company, it will pass because you will not find company. No, I'm kidding. Coming home to an empty place might seem sad to some people and upsetting that you're alone. But really for now, at this stage of my life, it brings me great comfort to just come home to a quiet place and be on my own. And maybe some of you can relate to this. Maybe some of you are at the same stage of life where that really calms you down and brings you peace. Being on your own and just figuring it out, whatever that might mean. What I recently fell in love with, this is a side note really, but what I recently fell in love with is taking baths in... My bathroom is quite small, so taking baths in a dark bathroom in silence, because I would normally watch something or listen to music when having a bath, but recently I've been enjoying just having a bath in silence and in darkness. I just light a single candle and it's still dark, and it is so relaxing. Like, I mean, I was shocked when I first did it, because it's just it just like mutes you down. It's amazing to do that before going to bed, because you're just like, it's like sleeping, but you're not sleeping. It's incredible. So try it if you have a bath and you like having baths. And another thing I like to do is just, this is a bit weird, but when it's dark, I like to sit on my dining table, light out some candles, and just stare into the night sky in silence. God, this might seem very sad, but it's just so relaxing, and you really just zone out. It's kind of like meditating, but you keep your eyes open, because in those moments I don't really think about much. Like, I am just inhaling the silence, and it's somehow so relaxing and incredible. And I really love to do that before bed, or before going to bed, because it's just so calming. So I don't know how we got here, but I just shared some of my relaxing rituals with you, and I hope you try them out, because they will calm you down. So like I said, my relationship with solitude was rocky. We're now in April, but let me read you some words I wrote in the fall time when I hated being alone. I wrote, "This fall was misery. Dry, hard, cold, and dark. It was empty and lonely. It was sadness and pain." I mean, I don't consider this to be a great poem, but this is really how I felt a few months ago when I just really hated being alone. Yeah, that was really sad. But things change. Seasons change. It might be just because it's springtime now, and summer's approaching, and I'm excited to go out and spend time with my friends more than I did in the fall and winter time. But yeah, that's my thoughts on solitude. That's everything I associate with the word, and it's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you in my next episode. Bye.